The Volkswagen Golf GTE used to just be a hybrid version of the regular hatchback, but now in its 8th generation it sits alongside performance models like the petrol-powered GTI and diesel GTD. However, it now matches the GTI on performance and betters the GTD on fuel economy. So does this new GTE render the GTI completely pointless? Well, today we're going to find out. But before I get into the review, remember to hit the like button and subscribe for more awesome videos just like this one. Like the old GTE, the new model looks pretty much identical to the GTI. So we've got the same honeycomb effect grille with a black surround that looks a little bit like a handlebar moustache. There is, however, one subtle difference, and it's a blue line that runs along the width of the car to show you that this is an eco car. And there is, of course, also a GTE badge, one at the front and one at the back. And like the GTI, we also have red brake calipers. You also get these 17-inch rims as standard, and I think they look dreadful, so I recommend upgrading to the 18s. And while I'm down here, we've also got the charging port. Now, the back also looks pretty much identical to the GTI as well. The only differences are it obviously says GTE, and there are no exhausts at the back. They're all tucked away behind the bumper, and that's how it should be done, Volkswagen. No need to put fake exhaustery down there. Under this extremely heavy bonnet is a 1.4 litre petrol engine producing just 148 brake horsepower, which sounds rubbish because the GTI has a 2 litre producing 242. But wait, we also have an electric motor, and combined we get 242 brake horsepower. And because it's electrified, it actually produces more torque than the GTI. However, with an electric motor, you need a battery, and they're located at the back of the car, which cuts into boot space dramatically. So a regular Golf has 381 litres, but in the GTE, you only get 273, which is less than what you get on a Polo and only a little bit more than what you have on an Up. There's also nowhere to store the charging cables, so you just have to lump them in the boot, cutting in to precious storage space. So at £36,000, the GTE is about £2.5 more expensive than the GTI, and it only just sits below the GTI Clubsport and the R. However, because it's a hybrid, it's going to be a really popular choice for company car buyers, and you should also save quite a bit of money on fuel bills as well, because you can drive this on electric energy alone. Now, the cabin is pretty much identical to the regular GTI, so if you want to see my review of that, click the link in the top right-hand corner where I'll go into this in a little bit more detail. However, there are some things I really wanted to pick out. So the first thing is, overall build quality is pretty decent. You've got a really lovely wheel. Volkswagen just seems to really nail it, and because it's something that you're going to be holding all the time, it's a really critical area. There are some slightly cheaper plastics around the centre console and also on the doors, but overall it's a very nice place to be. Now, the only problem I have with this car, and it's the same thing with the GTI, is the reliance on touch controls. It's borderline dangerous. It is so frustrating. So most of the car's controls are all handled on this central infotainment screen, and while it looks really very pretty, it's really quite complicated to operate when you're on the move. Let's take the climate settings, for instance. I can either press the climate button on the center of the dash here, which isn't a physical button, it's a touch control, or I can adjust some sliders on top of the dashboard, which is really quite fiddly when you're driving and need to lean down and press them. But it also brings up this really quite complicated screen of all these different settings that I can choose between. But I don't need any of that. I just would like it to be a little bit warmer. Now, while I give these touch systems a bit of a bashing, I really do like the touch controls that you get on the steering wheel. So the buttons don't physically move when you press them because it's all done through haptic feedback. So if I were to press the view button, I get a small rumble to confirm that I've pressed it. And it does feel like I've physically pushed something in. And you've also got, for something like the volume, you can either press up to increase the volume, down to decrease it, or you can work it as a slider, all of which give you a rumble to confirm that you've pressed a button. And it doesn't take long to get used to either. I got into this and just kind of started using it straight away. It works really, really well. Now, the batteries may be located at the back of the car, but it doesn't actually affect rear space. So I'm 180 centimetres and I've got loads of headroom, and the same goes for legroom. The driver's seat is in my position and I've still got quite a lot of space to go. So it's nice and roomy back here. You've got storage pockets in the back of the seat and 2 at the top here. And we've also got climate controls back here as well. So your rear passengers won't freeze or bake to death. Having spent quite a lot of time in this new Mark 8 Golf, I've just come to appreciate what an amazing product VW has made here, because not only is it crammed full of tech, and while some of it is really complicated to use, it does feel like a really solid product, and crucially, it's actually really enjoyable to drive. Now let's talk about what makes the GTE a GTE, and it's that battery taking up loads of room in the boot. Now it offers us up to 32 miles of electric-only driving, which isn't too bad, but it isn't class-leading. Now your mileage with that battery range will vary depending on the conditions and how you drive, but I was able to get pretty close to the 32 miles in my usage. Of course, you don't have to drive it on electric-only power. You can use the combustion engine and the battery together to give you a bit more performance. And when the two are combined, you get the full 242 brake horsepower, which then puts it on a level with the GTI. However, it doesn't feel like a hybrid GTI. They are quite different products. So for instance, because in the GTI you have just a more powerful engine and you have that power on offer pretty much all the time, it feels like a bit of a hot hatch. The GTE has the GTI's performance on paper, but it does feel like much more of a commuter car and more of a relaxed drive than the GTI. For instance, it doesn't have quite the snappy response on throttle that the GTI does. If you're on a B road, it feels like it's got 150 horsepower. It's only really when you slam the accelerator do you get the full whack of the hybrid system and the motor. So performance feels more like an on-off switch rather than something that's ingrained in the car's DNA. And then there are the brakes, which are not only used to stop the car, but they also help regenerate energy, which are put back into the battery. Now, what that means is that you kind of have some vagueness to the pedal. If you're just driving it casually on the road like I am at the moment, it's absolutely fine. It's very easy to control, and it's very easy to judge if you're gradually slowing into a corner. But if you're on a B road and you're bringing out your inner WRC driver, there is a little bit of a vagueness to them, and you kind of feel like you don't have a lot of braking power for about 50% of the pedal. You really do have to press it down to get the car stopped. Overall, though, it doesn't feel as sharp or responsive as a GTI, and in some ways that's a good thing because it sets the GTI up as the hot hatch of the range. However, I would like it if I could get something with that level of engagement from the GTI in a package that also gives me some electric-only driving. The GTE is not far off, but it's still not quite the same. That being said, the GTE is a brilliant car to drive, and that's really because the Golf Mark 8 is such a great car to drive. It's also got a really good chassis setup as well, and while I found it to be a little bit on the soft side in the GTI, I think it works really quite well in something like a GTE where it's very clearly a car built for motorway cruising. You don't want something that's going to be ultra harsh and super hot hatchy. You want it to be relaxing and serene, and that's really what a GTE is. Then there's the matter of price. It's £36,000, which is a lot of money. Particularly as if you were to look at something like a Skoda, you would be getting a bit more for a bit less. But I know what a lot of VW Golf buyers are like. If you've been driving a Golf for years, they are such great cars that why would you want to go for anything else, really? And this Golf really is a very impressive car and a real step on for VW. So if you are a Golf lover, I really don't think you're going to be disappointed with the GTE at all. And what's more, because it's a plug-in hybrid, it's actually going to be cheaper to tax as a company car than not only the GTI, but also the GTD. If it were my money, I still think I would go for a GTI, purely because I like having a performance car as my daily driver. And the GTI fits that bill so well because not only is it a really solid hot hatch, it's also very good at relaxing and becoming just an everyday family hatchback when it needs to. But if I had to put on thousands of miles per week, I would have no problems going with the GTE, especially as I get the added bonus of being able to drive it on electric power alone. So maybe it's not the case that the GTE renders the GTI pointless. It kind of makes you wonder why you would go for a GTD.